Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
I know this is hard to believe, but here to tell us why 1 in 4 employees will quit their jobs this year is Danny Nelms of the Works Institute. Danny, welcome to the program. When I saw this, we simply had to have you on the program.
Well, thank you so much, Don. It's a joy to be here, and I'm looking forward to discussing the 2018 retention report with you and telling you a little bit about what we've discovered.
Well, that's what we'd like to hear a little bit about you and the Workplace Institute.
So it's called the Work Institute. My name is Danny Nelms, and I've been the president of Work Institute since 2010. So been there for about 8 years and spent the prior 20 years of my career in human resources. So I've done a variety of things in HR and led a couple of HR functions in a couple of companies, but really have found my passion working with organizations around issues related to retention, engagement, and attraction to really help them discover how they can become better employers.
Well, with that as the opening, is it really true that on average, 1 out of every 4 employees will quit their job this year?
It absolutely is, Don, and that is one of the first things we do in our 2018 retention report is that we do a review of just all of the workplace dynamics and statistics that are out there. So you can find so much from just outlets like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and so we take all of that information and we put it together and try and make sense of it. And one of the things that we look at from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is the quits rate, which is really a measure of voluntary turnover in the U.S. right now. And so when you look at how big of an increase there's been in just voluntary turnover over the last few years, and you put a trend line on that, what it says is that 1 in 4 employees are indeed going to quit their jobs in 2018. And yes, that is a scary number.
That's extraordinary. Dan, on that note, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Perfectly.
Okay. Dan and Danny could be a little bit of a challenge. So, Danny, let me ask what I think should be an important question about your statistics. Of the 1 in 4 that are going to leave their job in the next 12 months, how many of them already have a new job?
How many of them already have a new job? Well, I think most of them, from what we can tell from the statistics, are leaving their job to take a job somewhere else. And that's really seen in the unemployment rate, right? Is the unemployment rate continues to decline. And as of April, we're sitting at about 3.9% unemployment, which really tells us that basically everybody that wants a job has a job. And so with the open jobs sitting now at some 6.3 million open jobs and that voluntary quit rate continuing to increase, it really does tell us that people are leaving one job to take another job. They're not out in the ranks of the unemployed.
Would it be, Danny, inappropriate to say that if I looked at this number 24 months ago, it would have been something dramatically different?
Well, it would have been. In terms of the 1 in 4, I mean, it was approaching that last year, but really it has been a continual increase over the last, since the recession, obviously. If you look at the trend line of the quits rate since 2010, it just continues to go up and up. And so And that has gone up along with the job openings and along with the reduction in unemployment. So it really is a matter of the trend over time. And we like to talk about it in terms of supply and demand. There's simply so much more demand for employees out there, there's so much more demand than there is supply. And that, is a factor of obviously the unemployment rate, but also a factor of the participation rate. We just are still hovering around 63% participation rate in our workforce. And a lot of that has to do with the baby boomers finally retiring, but also the fact that younger adults are staying in school longer, seeking to gain more education so that they can move into what they believe are certainly going to be better, higher-paying jobs. So there's just so many factors that are creating this environment that are clearly putting employees in control.
As a parallel to or an analogy to what you're saying, in some parts of the country, there's a real estate boom. And here in Florida, where I live, we're getting 3,000 families moving in a month to come to Florida from all over the country, but mostly from the north and the northeast. And so it's created a tremendous housing boom. And you see places go up from virtually nothing, and they're up, and then they're all sold. It's a supply and demand issue. My concern, Danny, is that we are maybe 15 months at the most under the Trump recovery. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York recently said that they thought that the GDP number for the fourth quarter of this year could be 4.1. If we're at 3.9% unemployment, and we could grow the economy from 2% to 3% to 4%, we're going to have a huge shortage of jobs, which means your 1 in 4 may go to 2 out of 4. Is that possible?
Well, it is absolutely possible. And according to the Fed, they're actually projecting unemployment to hit somewhere in the 3.5 to 3.6 range, which means it is going to continue to decline, which has really not been seen since the 60s. And, the challenge there is that, we're not, whereas in the housing analogy that you use, we typically can try and go build more houses. Unfortunately, we're not going to have more people necessarily in the workplace. We're hoping that we can attract some of those long-term unemployed back into the workplace. Unfortunately, in many cases, those individuals are not always suited for the jobs that are open in terms of what's driving the employment growth. So you're right, it is going to create some challenges, and that's why we say it's an employee-in-control market, because it is those companies that create the best places to work, the environment where they can, in fact, attract the best talent and retain the best talent that are going to be able to continue succeeding as opposed to those companies that don't pay attention to it.
Is it possible, Danny, because we're going to do a show about this shortly, and we just talked to somebody from the chamber who was excited about the show, and I'm not saying you should be excited. I wanted to bring it up to your attention. Is it
Sure.
possible that Company A has somebody who's retired, and they've been out of the workforce for 2-3 years, and they'd like to come back, and Company B hires them because they have a lot of experience. They can get them at a very attractive price. They don't necessarily work full-time, but they get vast experience. Is it possible that the senior group, the recently retired, say within 3 to 5 years, may be a exciting new source of people who are looking for something to do, something meaningful and productive, but not at what they used to do?
I think that's completely possible because, again, what we see, I'm going to go back to your housing industry analogy. When we have these big housing booms, one of the things that also happens is that we go back into neighborhoods that have been kind of downtrodden, if you will, and we rebuild houses, right? We refurbish them and remodel them, and all of a sudden we got, housing that's attractive to those new people coming into the market. So I think the same is true in the case of employees, is that I think that certain employees that may not have been, ideal in a situation where we had higher unemployment or fewer jobs available, I think suddenly they're going to look extraordinarily attractive. And again, it's all about how are companies going to adjust to, a new reality of this idea that employees are in control and they can sort of go and do whatever it is they want to do. And so we've got to create an attractive environment. And in many of those cases, it's going to be attracting those older workers back into the workplace. I think it's completely plausible.
So let me put you on the spot a little bit. We don't, as a nation, I'm making a statement. You don't have to agree with it. If you want to disagree, you can. We don't need unskilled labor coming across the border illegally. In fact, we may find ourselves in a global competition for human resources in other parts of the world to attract them to legally come into the United States and perhaps accelerate their ability to immigrate into the United States. Is it possible that the world could be a shopping ground for talent for America?
Well, I think one of the things that we found, and I want to just talk about immigration in a broader sense, is that immigration doesn't just fill the unskilled workers, but they actually fill jobs in the upper sector as well, especially in healthcare and in education. So, there are a lot of places that immigrants can bring, and a lot of skills that those individuals can bring into this country. How we make that plausible and make it legal and all those things, those are all political footballs that need to be figured out. But we are going to face shortages in this country. And so to the extent that we can sort out how we're going to be able to help companies continue to grow is going to be important.
I got one more question, then I want to turn it back to Don. Let's look at the 1 and 4. Let's look at the 4. Is it 50-50 males versus females? Are men more transient than women? What can you tell us there?
No, we don't really see that there's a huge trend one way or the other between males and females. We see that they sometimes leave for different reasons, not dramatically, but certainly they can sometimes leave for different reasons. But we're not seeing that one is leaving at a higher rate, if you will, than the other in the U.S. marketplace. So that is it's really parallels for the most part what the workplace participation rate looks like. Don, back to you.
Okay. I'm listening here and trying to frame questions, but I guess my main question is, why do people leave? When I was younger, they said they left not for money, but for perceived greater chance of advancement. And I've been told in this current generation that the gratification is as important or not. What are the reasons you think that people leave?
Well, Don and Dan, I don't have to think it. I actually have the opportunity to know it, and I think that's one of the critical things that you can find in our 2018 retention report that we've published, and that is, first of all, we've been studying this for a long time. So the Work Institute conducts exit interviews with a lot of companies all across the U.S. representing different industries and different size companies, and so over the last several years, we've done some 30,000 plus exit interviews with employees across the U.S. So we have a very, very large database that, by the way, was conducted in a very scientifically sound approach. We talk to the employees after they've left, usually about 2 weeks. And, of course, as an outside third party, the research tells us that we're getting a much more authentic reason for leaving than many of the traditional, last day of employment surveys that are out there. And what these folks are telling us as they're departing is that, in fact, career development is the number one reason why employees are leaving. They are looking for either a different type of work, and their company is not helping them to explore that different type of work within the company. They're looking for growth in their job, so they're not always looking for a promotion. Sometimes they're just looking to grow their skills and to feel like they're growing in their job. And, of course, in some instances they are leaving because they are leaving to go get a promotion. But collectively, all of those reasons around career issues do turn into the number one reason, which is about 1 in 5 employees, or 21%, leave for career development issues. So that is, in fact, the number one issue.
But during the last 2 or 3 years of the Obama administration, a lot of people were afraid to leave because they didn't see opportunities opening up in other companies. Do you believe that over the last 18 months that is changing, that people are moving because there are greater opportunities as well?
Well, I think there's no doubt about that, but I think we can track it back further than just the change in the administration. So if you go back and you look, and we show this in the 2018 retention report, is that really since the recession started to recover, so you're talking about the last several years of the Obama administration and then into the beginning years of the Trump administration, we have seen significant job growth. We have seen a continual decline in unemployment, and we've seen a rise in voluntary turnover. So it really is a product of the economic growth that we've seen really over the last 8 years, and that trend has been pretty consistent over the last 8 years. And that simply, again, creates this supply and demand issue so that employees have opportunities to go elsewhere if their current employer is not creating the conditions where they feel like they can be successful.
Well, but there was also much talk about so-called people who had left the workforce, whatever that number was, 8 million, 2 million, whatever the number was. I know that's not part of the survey, but are those people, in your opinion, being absorbed nowadays, or are they still out there floating?
Unfortunately, we're not attracting as many of them back into the workforce as we would like. I mean, I think we saw workforce participation rates in the 60s and maybe into the early 70s. I'm trying to recall this from memory, into the around 68% or so, and we're still stagnating around 63%. So there is a difference in terms of the percentage of the population that is participating in the workforce. Now, again, we have a couple of factors. One, we have this very large generation called the baby boomers who are now retiring. Now, many of them are waiting longer to retire. And as you mentioned, I think in a lot of cases, employers may be able to create the conditions where they can lure some of those retirees out of retirement, given certain circumstances or conditions. But we also have younger workers that are staying in school longer or going to college. We've made it a societal component that college is important, and it certainly is for many individuals. But there's a lot of jobs out there that can create incredible careers that are trade skills, things like electricians and plumbers and construction workers. People can have tremendous careers in those trade skills that don't require a college education. So in some ways, we may have to start looking at our educational system again to determine, are there ways that we can continue to fill the jobs that are out there that are needed that aren't necessarily jobs that require a college degree.
We're talking with Danny Nelms. He's head of the Work Institute. And I'm going to ask one more question before turning it back to Dan. Danny, this current generation, there's much talk about the various different generations and how they have differing values and differing attitudes. But is there a question of work ethic, a difference between older generation and the younger generation, or is that a myth?
I think it's predominantly, and we think it's predominantly a myth. I mean, there's no research out there that tells us really that employees in different generations actually behave vastly differently from the others. I mean, you've got to look at a couple of factors. One, we all grew up, as far as each generation grew up in different environments. So, the access to technology, the access to information, all of those things have made the, quote, millennials different in that they certainly had access to more information. I think part of what's getting overblown, though, is that the conditions in the workplace are playing right into the younger workers' wheelhouse. There are so many opportunities out there. There are so many open jobs out there. So if employers are not creating the ideal conditions to keep those employees, they simply are going to go somewhere else where they believe that these needs are going to be met. We really look at them in terms of career stage as opposed to this label that we all want to put on them, whether it's Gen X or Gen Y or millennials. The reality is that younger workers actually change jobs more often. And we can track that back through, years and years in the workplace, is that younger workers are going to change jobs more often. I did. I'd venture to say maybe the two of you did. And yet we've tried to put labels on it to say that they're somehow behaving vastly different than any of the generations before. And there's not a whole lot of research to back that up.
Well, Dan, I just want to ask one more question because it's fascinating. But the dislocation brought about by robotics and AI, is that going to have what kind? The question should be what type of effect will it have on the workforce?
Well, I think what we find more often than not is that that new technology creates different kinds of jobs. I mean, I think we have always felt over the years that somehow AI or robotics was going to impact the workforce significantly, that somehow machines were going to be able to do the jobs that humans once did. And there certainly are instances where that occurs. The reality is it just creates other jobs. So when you think about it, those technologies have to be created. They have to be developed. And so then there are jobs in other companies that develop that technology to be able to put it in, say, the automotive industry. So it's almost like it reinvents itself to create jobs elsewhere in order to provide that technology. So we are finding that as a nation, we're more productive, and maybe the higher productivity comes from some of that automation. But at 3.9% unemployment, I think it's hard to say that people that really want to work and are in need of a job aren't finding those opportunities out there.
Dan, back to you for the last two questions.
Okay. Danny, is your study available for the public to read?
It absolutely is. They can find it at our website. It's www.workinstitute.com/2018 retention report. So it's readily available out there. There's certainly a few media outlets that have picked up pieces of the report, but you can easily find it on our website.
And when you prepare this report, do you prepare it or does somebody else prepare it for you?
We actually prepared ourselves, and we certainly want to take an unbiased view. So it's written from the perspective of simply being, I guess, scholars of the workplace, if you will, and trying to understand that workplace better. One of the things that I want to go back to Don asked earlier about the reasons for leaving, and we talked about career development as number one. One of the things that didn't come up is pay, and we always talk about pay being the reason why people leave, or at least a lot of outlets talk about that. Pay comes in at number 5, so it is a reality in some cases that people leave for pay, but it's actually less than 10% of the employees actually leave for pay reasons. Manager behavior comes in at number 3, so that manager is such a linchpin to retention because they can impact work-life balance, they can impact career development, they can impact employees wanting to work for the manager. So I think it's important to look at all of the reasons for leaving and understanding that we believe that 3 out of 4 of the reasons for leaving are actually more preventable, and that if companies were doing more and paying attention, that they could actually prevent 3 out of 4 of their employees from leaving to go somewhere else.
On that note, Dan, I'm afraid we're going to have to ask Danny again for his website. We've been talking with Danny Nelms. He's the head of the Work Institute. Danny, your website again for people?
www.workinstitute.com, and you can find our 2018 retention report on the website.
Danny, thank you so much. A link to your website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future Recalculating radio show. Danny, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Welcome back to Recalculating, the program dedicated to American small business. Now it's time to bring together our two experts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella, as they discuss things that are happening now that are affecting your business success.
Dan, I'm really pleased to have our next guest. Randy Weir is here to talk about what I consider one of the most important issues, 5 safety tips for a secure home office. Randy, welcome to the program. But before we do anything else, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name's Randy Weir. I live in the Colorado area, so I'm out here in the Rocky Mountains. I've been doing IT stuff for 25 years now. On the side, I am an author as well, and write fictional books to keep my mind active in my spare time.
Well, since both Dan and I are authors, and we like people to pitch their book, tell us the name of your book and tell us your website.
Sure. There's actually a series of books. I have 7 of them, to be precise, and they're all in the same series. The latest book is called The Front Range Butcher. They're kind of the old-style private detective novels, but with modern twists and turns, kind of a hard-boiled detective who kind of gets himself into situations, kind of lives from day to day, money-wise, and things like that. But the latest book is The Front Range Butcher, and was just released last month. And my website is rweir, so rweir.net. And that's where you can find all the information on my books. They're on Amazon, and some of the books are on other various ebook and paperback sellers around the country.
Well, how did you come to come up with the idea? Because I like your 5 tips, and we're going to get into it. But what made you decide to put them together?
The 5 tips on IT type of thing?
Or the 5 safety tips.
Sure. Well, it was, I think they're all, that's all pretty much a big issue these days for everybody is security in the IT world. And we're all on the internet. We all have phones. We're all connected all the time. And it's I hate to say it, it's a dangerous world out on the internet. We need it. It's there. It has its good things, but there's a lot of bad out there, and people need to be prepared when they're out there and watch for things, practice good safety habits when it comes to security. Don't get click happy. As I like to tell when I was IT, when I did IT support for people, I said, don't get click happy on those emails. Kind of look at it first and say, this looks a little fishy to me. Maybe I better not be clicking on stuff. So, but it's there's just so much theft. I mean, there's millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of IT theft every day. Your personal identity can be thrown out there on the internet, and it can be up for sale. So it's just one of those things that people have to be very, very careful about what they're doing when they're out on the web these days.
Well, you're absolutely right. I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and I'll let him ask you about the 5 safety tips. Dan, it's all yours.
Thank you. And Dan, Randy, when we decided to have you on the show, it was important because, as you're right, cybersecurity is a very important issue. So let's start off by talking about what are the 5 tips that small business people who work at home need to know to make a more secure environment. What are those 5?
Sure. So do you want me to take them one at a time, or do you just want me to go ahead and list the 5 various ones? Okay.
Go ahead.
So
go ahead and list the 5, and then we'll work our way through.
Gotcha. Okay. So, one is to protect your home office. What's the best way? Or your small business office. A lot of people work at home. Maybe they have a small business that they work at, have a small office, but can't afford to have real expensive IT support. That's really the first thing. What kind of protection is needed to make sure your work valuables remain safe? So, there's physical security, obviously, and then there's security when you're out on the internet. So there's a couple of different ways there.
Okay.
And why is it important to protect your home documents? Obviously, there's a lot of reasons there. And what can happen if these documents are compromised? And will there ever be a way to stop this type of criminal activity? And I definitely have some strong thoughts on that as well. So
that's probably the easiest to get to because probably the answer is no. As long as you've got creative minds and computer technology, somebody's always going to try and use it to do bad things.
Yeah, unfortunately, and it's big business these days, and there's a lot of it is overseas in Russia and China, North Korea. There's a lot of theft, and it's big money, and they definitely really prey on people's poor security habits when it comes to the internet, which you can't have.
Let's start with your first recommendation, and let's talk about that.
Sure. So you're protecting your home office. So one of the biggest things there is having smart security habits, and it kind of narrows down to 2: what operating systems your computers are using, if you're using Windows, if you're using Mac, or if you're using Linux. Linux and Mac are generally more secure and are safer to use. They're not 100% safe, whereas Windows traditionally has not been as safe. So when you make those choices, the biggest thing is to make sure those computers are properly updated and patched. And I would suggest using encryption on your computers. And you may want, and sometimes it's hard on phones to do encryption because and you're not usually storing as many documents on a phone or a tablet like you would on your home computer. But real-world encryption on your computer, let's say the computer is stolen, people can take that hard drive out, and if there's not encryption on there, they can read all the data on your computer. It's really easy to do. We used to do that in the IT world all the time for recovering data. So encryption is a good idea. And all operating systems come with built-in encryption options, but they're not on by default. And like in the Windows world, you have to have a professional version of Windows. If you use the home version, which I do not suggest for any business usage, and really even for personal usage, I would suggest using a professional version of Windows because you have the option to encrypt automatically built into there. So
you just, if I just understand what you said
Sure.
you would not recommend using the home edition of Windows to
Correct.
run your business.
That's correct. You should use a professional version at the very least.
And the reason why you don't like the home version is?
But there is not built-in encryption options in it. It's also generally not as secure. And the other thing with the professional version of Windows as opposed to home, the home version, you can't generally delay updates. And though you want to keep your computer up to date, you generally want to be careful with updates because Microsoft has been known to put out enough that can hose an operating system. So it's usually a good idea just to wait a week or so before that updates are installed, make sure there's no problems that crop up that people talk about on the Internet, and there's a lot of places on the Internet where you can find out about Windows updates that have hosed up a computer. But the home version, you don't have as many options to delay updates. A lot of times they'll download as soon as they're out a day or two later. They download and they're ready to install on your computer within 24, 48 hours in a lot of cases.
I want to ask you a question about something you just said. And I've heard it many times, and I still don't understand why. The Windows operating system, almost from the very beginning, they're the most current version, has always had problems. Operating lockups, freeze-ups, lost data, interference with other programs. And I don't understand, how does Microsoft get away with putting out such garbage?
Yeah, that's an age-old question. They've always had such a very strong, large market, and you get lock-in sometimes too. Once you're locked into something, it's hard to get out of it. So, like in the business world, most of the business world has used Windows for years and have dealt with the problems. The various versions. Windows 3.1, Windows 95. All the way up to, Windows 10. People have just had to do, business worlds have just more or less dealt with those problems. I guess that's always kept us IT guys in business. And security has always been the worst thing about Windows. Up until Windows 10, which is much more secure, and it's been secure over time, but Windows in the past, when the first viruses came out, they would just take over computers and the Internet, and your only option was to just wipe them out, wipe off the computer and start all over again. That was really just the only choice. So, but I think a lot of it has to do with lock-in. You get locked into the Windows world. They put it out. They did a good job of marketing. When Windows 95 came out, they had the Rolling Stones and Start Me Up and all that, and they just marketed well, and people got into that, and then, of course, the business world jumped in there as well, and now they're kind of locked in there. And, some businesses have gone to Mac, some have gone to Linux, which are generally more secure, though, they have their issues too. with their operating systems, but it's obvious it's much more prevalent because Windows is on 90% of the computers in the world. So you hear about them so much more.
So our first of 5 is be secure by using encryption technology for your computer. And if it's not available on your computer, get it for your computer. Is that fair?
I would say encryption is an important thing, and then keeping your computers patched. Though don't necessarily patch those computers, 5 minutes after the update comes out. But you do need to keep your those computers patched, your software patched, your browsers up to date. Most browsers update automatically these days, which is good. It's basically like Google Chrome and them. You just basically have to close it and reopen it, and it'll finish updating. And those automatic updates for those things are great. And
so what would be your second item?
Those.
What would be your second item?
Second item on my list?
Of 5, yes.
Yeah, so the protection you need to make sure your work valuables are safe. Encryption obviously is one of those as well. I would use some type of cloud service for your documents, whether it would be Dropbox, Box, OneDrive is a great place to put your work files in the internet. So you have them in a cloud service. They sync automatically when you make changes to documents. You'll have a local version on your computer, but there's also a cloud version. And this protects you from when your computer crashes, which is inevitable. If anyone's ever had a computer, they've likely had a computer die on them somewhere along the line. And what's worse than losing all your files? You used to back up everything onto portable devices. You can still do that, but portable devices can also fail. They also can be lost. So, I currently use OneDrive for my files to sync to the internet. OneDrive used to be well behind Box and Dropbox when it came to quality and features. They've caught up quite a bit. And if you use Microsoft Office, the Office 365, OneDrive is built in, and you get like a terabyte of space, which is a lot of space for files. But that type of protection of those files, because your documents are your intellectual documents are safe also on the internet. They're backed up by them, whoever that service is. You can easily share the documents with other people without having to email them, because emailing a document, which we all do, is not secure. If you send an email, it's going out across the internet. It's anybody could retrieve it if they know what they're doing. They could intercept it across routers and things like that. So you can set up a link that only allows that person to access it, password protected. So all that type of stuff, all those type of services, I think, are a great idea to protect those documents, because that's your valuables of your business.
Right. I'm going to ask you number 3, and then after you're done, we'll turn it back to Don, and he can ask you 4 and 5. So what's 3?
Sure. Okay. So why is it important to protect those documents? Well, that's your intellectual property. That's your personal data. Most people keep track of their banking records, credit card records, things like that. Well, with identity theft, people can take your identity, go out there and create credit cards with your name, if they've got your Social Security number, any of those things. So identity theft, if you really need to protect those home documents because of that type of theft. Or there's also what's called ransomware malware. So let's say you get a malware on your computer, and your computer, basically what they do is they encrypt your computer, and you need a key to unlock your computer to get to your documents. Well, now you're up a creek, right, without that key, so you have to pay them money to get your own documents. So that type of malware is out there. The personal identity theft, and then it's your intellectual property as well. You don't want other people to have your thoughts, your things, unless you're sharing them with another client or something like that, because that's very important for you as a business. You don't want people stealing that from you.
Okay. I'm going to give it back to Don.
I learned a lot, but why don't you give us the fifth one?
Yeah, so I actually 3 and 4 kind of run into each other a little bit, because what can happen if they're compromised? Well, I kind of talked about that. Identity theft. Your intellectual property is taken from you. Your banking records can be taken from you. So those are the things that once they're out there, if somebody has your identity and they've created that, they can ruin you financially. I mean, it's unfortunately that's a hard fact of life, and it's happened to many, many people. So you always want to protect that information. Another thing is solid passwords are very important when it comes to protecting your property. And we can't have the same passwords on every account we have out there. Your banking accounts. It's good to use dual authentication in a lot of cases for banking sites. So when you log into that site, they may send you a text with a code that you have to also put in to allow you to get in. That's a great measure, and I suggest that for any banking site to do. Do some type of dual authentication. It's a one extra step you have to take. It's a little bit of a pain, but it's a lot better than someone getting into your bank account and getting your information from you and stuff. So those type of things are really important, and you use really good passwords as best as you can, and use a lot of special characters. Don't use the same ones on every website too, which we all do. And if it's a website where you don't really care, it's probably okay to do. But your banking sites, your own website, if you have your own website, you want to make sure you have good passwords, because people can come in and hack your website as well, especially if you do any type of banking through your website, any type of purchasing.
We're talking with Randy Weir. He's an author. He's an IT specialist, and he's giving us a fascinating a list for all of us. Randy, have you completed the list? Are we missing one?
Well, the only one was will there ever be a stop to this type of criminal activity? And unfortunately, in a free society, at least in a pre-internet, free society, I'm afraid that there probably never will be a stop to this type of criminal activity. The only way it's going to stop is if users take better measures to secure their documents, be smarter about when they're on the internet. Those are the best deterrents of all. The user, a lot of times can be the weakest link, and they take advantage of you. Don't fall for that email that's sent to you that says, "I've got $10 million. I'm trying to get into the United States, and can you help me get it in there?" I think we've all seen emails like that from Kenya or somewhere. And they want then you to send them money, and then they'll send you this money to hold on, and will pay you a finder's fee, because they're trying to get it past the government. So those type of things, I'm afraid, until the users get smarter and really are more careful, think more about what they're doing when they're on the internet. Don't go, like I said, click happy, click on every little web page, every little link. And of course, you got to stay off a lot of the sites that are inappropriate. That a lot of phishing sites, obviously, the pornography sites. A lot of sites will upload malware into without you even knowing.
Well, Randy, I'm going to ask you one more question and turn it back to Dan for the final two. But the FBI recently issued a report and said that you should turn off your router every night now. Not only your computer, but your router. What do you say about that?
Well, that's actually not bad idea. The only thing about that is, as long as you can wait in the morning for all that to boot up. Sometimes it doesn't take long, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but depending on your internet speed and stuff. I had not read that, and I know that I had read something recently that there's a lot of they were saying there are some routers that are now coming with malware built into them. And I actually, the one of my books, Dead Man Code, I talk about that, where a fictional tech company is putting out infected devices to steal people's identity. So it's very interesting that they bring that up and talk about those type of things. But the only safe way, completely 100% safe way, is to be completely disconnected from the internet. So turning off your router, turning off your cable modem, probably is not a bad idea, as long as there isn't data that you need to get overnight on your computer, or a lot of updates run overnight as well. So sometimes then you're going to have to wait for those updates to install, maybe during normal hours or during your daytime hours instead of at night. So that probably isn't a bad idea, especially if you had histories of problems.
Well, that's what I'm going to do tonight. Back to you, Dan, for the final two questions.
Thank you. Is there one? I know I'm trying to be overly simplistic here, but is there one absolute something everybody should do, regardless of how big or small their business is, that it should be part of their daily routine? Is it turning off the modem, or is it something else?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's really one surefire thing. I mean, it's a lot. Some of it's a lot of little things. Some of it's a lot of big things where you do need to do. But turning off, if you can disconnect like that at the end of the day and shut off your equipment, that can protect you. But a lot of what is going to attack you is when you're actually on the internet. It's those emails you get, those links, and I just think the biggest thing is just people have to be real smart, real cautious sometimes about what they're doing. If that email comes, even if it's from someone but this is someone I know, but why are they sending me this link to click on that's going to take me to somewhere that I'm not really sure I even want? I wasn't expecting it. Because there's a lot of malware that gets into people's mailboxes, gets into there and emails out the same email to everybody in their contact list. So it looks like it's coming from a trusted source, but it isn't trusted in that case. So those are the things. I think the biggest thing is just trying to just be a little more cautious about everything as a user. You can't be afraid of it, but you got to be cautious of it and say, gee, this looks a little fishy to me. I'm going to wait. And sometimes you got to pick up the phone and call the person. I used to tell that all the time when I was in the IT world. It's like, yeah, it came from someone at work, but if you aren't sure, pick them up and call them. And they go, no, I did not send that out. And sometimes that 2-minute phone call will save you a lot of grief.
So do you still do IT consulting?
I do. I do IT stuff. I'm kind of concentrating on my author stuff right now. But I was working until last year, and I've done some IT stuff. I've done some contract work on the side and things like that. So I still do.
So how would people get a hold of you? What would be the best way to do that?
Well, they can always email me. I'll be cautious about the email when they send it, but I'll make sure. But it's just Weir, RWEIR, 720 @gmail.com. And, they can contact me that way. They can contact me through the website where my books are at as well. If they want to go to that, rweir.net, they can always contact me there as well.
Good. Don, back to you.
Well, unfortunately, Randy, we've run out of time. We've had Randy Weir with us talking about ways of protecting your home office. A link to his website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future Recalculating radio program. Randy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Don and Dan. Enjoyed talking with you.
Hello, I'm Dan Perkins, the co-host of Recalculating, and I just found out that I'm a type 2 diabetic. I don't know about you, but I was scared. I went to the diabetes classes at the hospitals and was overwhelmed with all of the information. I'm not a doctor. I'm a diabetic looking for a better way to treat my diabetes. It's important to me to try and treat my diabetes with a minimal amount of drugs. I found the Diabetic Solution Kit. It's a proven system used by over 300,000 people that help them balance their blood sugar, lower their A1C, and treat diabetes at the root cause. When you follow the simple instructions, the solution kit could help you get off of drugs, and it may even alleviate your need for daily insulin shots with your doctor's approval. If you're looking for an alternative in treating your diabetes, then you need to consider the Diabetic Solution Kit. I know it helped me, and maybe it can help you. Go to recalculating.biz and look for the solution kit link. Click on it and learn more.
Tell me, Dan, tell me about your latest book.
My current book that's coming out, I should say, is Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And it's really the first book written for children between the ages of 9 and 12 and their families dealing with dementia. Dementia is a growing problem with the elderly in the United States and around the world. And we are not very well informed about what's going on, what's happening. So I wrote this book in the form of a mystery. And I have two little girls, 9 and 12, who have a magical power to seem to be able to find things that are lost. And so they go to their dads and moms and they say, you know, we work all over the neighborhood helping people find things, and we seem to find things. And their dad says, yes, you have a magical talent to do that. And they said, we'd like to start a business to see if we can help other people. So they decided to start a business. The two girls' names are Hudson and Charlotte. And they start H&C's Lost and Found. If you've lost it, we find it. And so they build a business, and they convince the dads to build them an office and a treehouse in the backyard. And they get busy making posters and flyers trying to get customers. And their dads take them downtown, and they put them in the windows and on the telephone poles and light poles. And they go home, and first week goes by, and nobody comes. And the second week and third week, and nobody comes. They're really, really dejected. And the fourth week comes, and there's a knock at the door. And they walk over and open the door, and there's a young man standing there with one of their flyers in his hands. And he says to them, my dad says the reason why my Grammy can't remember me is because she's lost her memory. And your flyer says you find things that are lost. Can you find my Grammy's memory? Well, they don't know anything about memory, so they take his name and they go see their dads to see what can happen. And the story evolves into how they learn about what dementia is and what's going on in the body when somebody has dementia. And then they decide, while they can't find their customer's memory, they can help him build the tools to retain her in his memory. And so at the end of the book, there are about 10 to 12, 13 things that families can do together to work on to preserve the memory of Grandma and Grandpa so the generations can know who these people were. And that's the story.
What a great book. When will it be available, and how can people get it?
Well, it'll be available on Amazon.com. A lot of people who have read it, who've had moms and dads that have been stricken with Alzheimer's and dementia, tell me that they really now begin to understand what's happening in Grandma's brain. And we took a different approach. Rather than do the typical brain cross-section, I work with the artist, and we design highways in the brain. And there's a brain of one of the little girls and the brain of Grammy. They both have highways, roads, but the girl's brain, everything is green and go. Grammy's brain is full of no left turns, do not enter, stop, no right turns. So all of the messages that need to come from our brain get screwed up, and we can't function. Great illustrations, though. Wonderful illustrations.
Well, say goodbye, Dan.
All right.
Time for us to go.
Thank you for joining us. And by the way, if you didn't hear all of today's show, you can go to recalculating.biz, and you can pick up this show and past shows to expand your knowledge as becoming more successful entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for being with us today. From Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.